Well, if the change in chairs wasn't waking us up, the little bumps here and there as we move into the season of Lent hopefully have, and that's all good. To be woken up, to be woken up. Now I'd like to invite you to pray with me, please. God, I ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations in all of our hearts might be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Striking stories tend to have contrasts that make us sit up and take notice. Like the story of Nicole Cardoza, who is the CEO of a project called 28 Days of Black History, but who lists magician in her title first, because she is also developing a magic kit to be brought to market that not only sounds like it'll be tons of fun, but describes how it will help kids develop social emotional learning skills and include representation for kids of color so they don't open the box and feel that magic is something intended for someone else. It sounds like Nicole is doing amazing things, and seeing magician listed before CEO catches one's attention, helps people pay attention to the story she's trying to tell. So too might our attention be caught by today's gospel story when we read or hear multiple contrasts as Jesus is affirmed as God's Son by God in a voice from cloud, and then immediately driven into the wilderness by the Spirit, God again, where he is tempted by Satan, but also where he is with wild beasts who do him no harm and angels who wait on him. Affirmed by God as God's Son, driven by God into the wilderness, tempted by Satan, yet wild beasts do not hurt him and angels care for him. Either God is actually bipolar or this story is intended to catch our attention. Just as Nicole Cardoza's title tells us about her identity and sense of purpose, so do all of the twists and turns and contrasts of the gospel story tell us about Jesus' identity and purpose. Jesus is the Son of God, who even in human form can perfectly resist the temptations of Satan and walk amidst the wilderness, safe from the wild beasts prowling about, divinely provided for by the angels. And as we enter this 40-day journey of Lent, hearing about Jesus' identity can remind and give us courage for our own identities and purpose. We are children of God. Not God incarnate as human as Jesus was, but nevertheless beloved and held, whether we see or acknowledge it or not, by the love and care and protection of God. The wild beasts and adversity and challenges of this world will be a part of our journeying, or they'll land on our doorsteps, even if we try to hide from them at home. Yet we journey not alone in this world, but with God. God to whom, as the psalmist writes, we lift up our souls, and in whom we place our trust. The psalmist goes on to beseech God to make God's ways known to us, to lead us to God's truth and teach us and to forgive us. Knowing or discovering again that we are freed from sin and held in protected love amidst adversity, we go forth to share the good news that all of humanity and this world has an identity as beloved, an identity as forgiven, an identity of being called and sent so that others may lay down their weapons of prejudice and hatred and take up the work of healing and justice. And it's not our own strength and perfection that makes this work possible, but Christ's perfecting love and strength. As the writer of 1 Peter says, Christ suffered for sins for the righteous and the unrighteous in order to bring us to God. Lent is a season of the church year intended to turn things upside down and inside out. Apparently make noise as I smack the microphone. Just as some or all of us might find it uncomfortable to have the chairs in the sanctuary moved around, or to have to find a new or different place to sit. Oh no. Or maybe from home have a different view through the camera that shows some of the congregation gathered here in person. So too, Lent is supposed to make us a bit uncomfortable. It's supposed to nudge us out of our usual habits, including our habits of how we think, in order to help us reconsider who we are and what our purpose as people might be. What are the monikers we place after our names? CEO, magician, beloved and redeemed child of God? If we can muster the courage, or see that we have all the courage that we could ever need waiting for us in Jesus, who can journey the wilderness safe from the wild beasts, if we can remember this courage, then we might allow for these 40 days of Lent to be a time of formation and reformation. We might bring a loving, compassionate awareness to our lives and actions and consider which of these things might be distancing us from God or don't serve God's purposes, loving purposes in the world. Then allowing God to wrap us mercifully in the garment of forgiveness, we might pick one small change, or two, or three, or if you're feeling really bold, even more, that might help you, us, me, participate in this redeeming and reorienting work of God. Nicole Cardoza of 28 Days of Black History laid claim to her identity in a way that might be more likely to make people sit up and pay attention. Not just CEO, but magician and CEO. As Christians, we are not trying to get people to sit up and take notice of us, but rather the loving and forgiving God whom we worship and serve, and who forms and makes possible the backbone and core of our identity as beloved children of God. With such an identity marker by our names, child of God, and parent, grandparent, or grand aunt or uncle, child of God and teacher, philanthropist, plumber, administrator, therapist, actor, magician. With such an identity marker next to whatever other name we might put by ourselves as part of our identity, we might be able to better remember that Jesus journeys this wilderness with us. Jesus will protect us from the wild animals prowling about. Jesus will help us to participate in bringing the good news to others, to this hurting and broken world, that God's kingdom, God's love and grace and mercy has come near for all of us who need to hear it. I feel like she's getting ready to be a preacher. For those of you at home who might not hear it, we're still hearing wonderful chirrups just outside the sanctuary from our currently youngest congregational member. I love it. I love it. The noise of children in worship means that children are in worship. I invite us to take just a moment, another breath or two, maybe considering what are the names we have put next to ourselves consciously or unconsciously, and how might that change if we start by remembering that we are beloved and redeemed children of God.